What's up, guys? My name is Marcel Pilach. I'm not American, I'm Brazilian, which may cause some of you this initial, let's say, prejudice or something like, what does this dude know about basketball? He know nothing about basketball. I know that, but I don't care about it. I'm here just going to show you my opinion, but my opinion based on argumentation, based on facts, based on stats, based on the true story created by both of these players, Michael Jordan and Wilt Chamberlain. It's long been put that Michael Jordan is the greatest of all time, which in fact is true if we consider that these gold statues accounts much more than basketball. Wilt Chamberlain himself has once said in 1997 interview, I believe, he said that all of the players in the NBA should give 10% of their salary to Michael Jordan because he was the guy who set the standard to the game of basketball as a entertaining, professional, worldwide business. All right. And when I say business, I'm not trying to be critical here. I'm saying in terms of how much you would profit with the game of basketball. So he said that every player should give 10% of their salary, not just the present or current players by then, but the future and the past ones. They should give 10% of their salary to Michael Jordan. Rick Barry also has this phrase which says that Michael Jordan was the most entertaining, or probably the most entertaining player to ever put on a jersey, and the most exciting player to watch, and the greatest shooting guard ever. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar also said the same. He said that his athleticism and his capacity to take the game of basketball to places where it has never been to should be given to him. You know, he should be honored by that. But all of these two guys, Barry and Jabbar, not to mention Chamberlain himself, also put it very clear, made it very clear that when we are analyzing the game of basketball, it's another story. And even if the three of them agree somehow that it's hard to say that one guy has been the best ever, it's easier to say that they have been the best of their generations or the best at their positions. The three of them agree that Jordan wasn't this guy. And the two of them, not to say Chamberlain himself, say that Chamberlain was this one. I will put the links in the description of this video about this interview of Jabbar, of Barry, and the letter Jabbar wrote where these quotes are there, okay? Many other players have said that Wilt was the greatest ever. Some of these players have said that Michael is the greatest ever. The guys who came after Michael obviously put him as number one all time and not Wilt Chamberlain or any others. Sometimes they talk about Jabbar, sometimes they talk about LeBron. Once in a while they talk about Magic. Some of them say about Kobe. But let's say majority of the players and the analysts 80s on put Michael Jordan there in this place. Many players of Michael's time, many, Karl Malone and John Stockton, Gary Payton, Scottie Pippen himself, many others either put Wilt Chamberlain as the greatest ever or some other guy, but most of them say that it isn't Michael, or at least you can't say who was it, okay? So opinions are very important. We should always analyze what the peers say, what the people involved in the game say. It's obviously something very relevant to take into account. But still, it's not what I want to bring to you guys here. I would like to talk about the numbers, the stats, and effectiveness of both Michael Jordan and Wilt Chamberlain. I've always heard the saying, Wilt has been great during the regular season, but in playoffs, his game went down. He couldn't play as good. He dropped so many points, which proves that he didn't play as good in the playoffs as he played during the regular season. Michael, on the other hand, has always played better in the playoffs. His numbers always increased. He was a clutch player and etc. Okay. When we look to the averages of their careers, it might be true. So we call this as a fallacy, right? You look at the numbers and the numbers might tell you something. Jordan, 30.1 points per game. Wilt Chamberlain, 30.1 points per game during the regular season. Playoffs, Michael Jordan, 33.4 points per game. Wilt Chamberlain, 22.5 points per game. Case closed. Michael far better, improved more than 3 points. Wilt decreased almost 8 points, almost 8 points. So it's over for you, Wilt. First of all, when we look at these numbers, we are not contextualizing anything, right? Just saying the numbers. Second thing, only scoring is being taken into account when we compare these two players. And the game is not only about scoring. Absolutely not. I recommend to you guys to watch the Dream Season 23 and 24 documentary, which is available on YouTube. Many parts of this document had been taken from another documentary, which is The Road to Redemption, talking about the 2008 Olympics in Beijing, where the Redeem team, the famous Redeem team, and this video concentrates on LeBron and Kobe as the two greatest ever of the generation, the two greatest of the generation, right? But there's a quote by Kobe during this video when he talks to the coach and says that we should concentrate in defense and rebounding. As far as I know basketball, if you adjust the rebounding, you can win every time, no matter who you play against. So defense and rebounding wins. That was said by Kobe Bryant, which is a heavy scorer, a guy who scored 60 points in his farewell game, a legend who is remembered by scoring. He said that. And we also have the famous quote by Michael Jordan, which says that great players win games, great teams win championships. So these two things must be taken into account because they are true, not because who said that, but because it's true. A player might affect a game, or within a series, he might be effective and take that series. He might do something special over 2 or 3 games in a series and cause a turning, you know. But for a team, for someone to be champion, it must have a team around him. I'm not saying that Wilt always played with bad players and Mike always with great players, but their story is based on that, on the fact that who of them have been surrounded by better players, better teammates, and facing worse opponents. That's basically what says, what defines why Michael has 6 rings and Wilt has 2. Not that Wilt didn't play as good as Michael played during the postseason. All right. Second thing to be put, as I said, is the rebounding and the defense. Wilt has been champion when he gave away on his points, when he decided to change his game into a team player, let's say, a playmaker or a defender first. It wasn't that he couldn't score anymore. It wasn't. He has scored many times during this 67 season on. Where is this mindset changing? Since the 1966-67 season, he changed his role. He decided to stop scoring at the same level and decided to concentrate on playmaking. So that's when he went to lead the league in assists over those 2 seasons. In 1967, he averages 7.8 assists per game, and he's the third in that run. And in 1968, he averages 8.6 assists per game and is the leader. Triple doubles, a lot of them, not accounting the blocks, which would have been several quadruple doubles, not just triple doubles. So we are not talking here about the blocks, okay? We don't have these as official stats, so we won't take that into consideration. We're just talking about points, rebounding, and assists, okay? And then he would change later on in the Lakers, when playing for the Lakers, he would concentrate on defense and rebounding. Of course, he maintained that through all this time. Also, he increased his shooting accuracy, all right? So, Michael Jordan fans will always say that if he hadn't left, the game for playing baseball, his numbers would be even bigger. He would have been 8 consecutive time champion, which is just crazy to think, like the difficulty Michael's teams and Michael especially had against the Hakeem Olajuwon teams. But not taking that into consideration, and not also taking into consideration the fact that Michael made several mistakes during the 1995 playoff run. He made, as great players win games, players might also lose games, and that's why the Bulls lost the first game in the Eastern Conference semifinals 1995 against the Magic because of Michael Jordan, all right? And to say that he was suffering of court rust or his physical, his body wasn't in basketball shape, like he says, is just a story that he made up. First, take a look at Kevin Durant, what he did during this last season. Same age as Michael was in 1995. He's been absent since the 2019 playoffs, the finals, and he came back to playing now this year, and look what he did. So to say that Michael was suffering more than Kevin Durant suffered, to say that he had a harder time to adapt his body back to basketball shape, okay. Wilt also had a major injury during the 1969-1970 season and came back to playoffs that year. He played just the last 3 games of the season and went on to the playoffs and made an amazing playoff run. 1970 playoffs by Wilt Chamberlain, far better than 1995 playoffs by Michael Jordan, all right? Having Michael Jordan playing many more games before the playoffs than Wilt played back in 1970. And Wilt was a year and a half older, and he was coming back from an injury. But my point here is, and I will share it with you guys, I will put many links in the description of this video, but especially one Google Docs, which I wrote 17 pages comparing all of the numbers by Michael Jordan and Wilt Chamberlain all of the numbers related to points, rebounding, and assists. And I will also break down these points, you know, in field goals, 3-point field goals in case of Michael, and free throw attempts. Basically, what I want to tell you guys is, if we only considered Michael Jordan's career until the end of the 1993 season, when he left the game at the age of 30 years old, going to play baseball, having played 9 seasons in NBA. And if we only took those seasons into account, all of the numbers in the regular season, in the playoffs, and we compared those numbers to Wilt Chamberlain's first 9 seasons, which coincides to his last season for the Philadelphia 76ers, before going to play for the Lakers, before later on suffering the injury and coming back to play as a defender. So we are not taking into consideration Michael's return, 2 of his returns. And we are not taking into consideration all the Lakers period of Wilt Chamberlain. We have the same 9 seasons and a very close number of games, very close number of games. I tell you guys that Wilt Chamberlain's numbers in the regular season during these 9 seasons compared to Michael's 9 seasons is far better. And if we took into consideration the numbers of Wilt Chamberlain during these 9 seasons versus Michael's numbers in the 9 seasons during the playoffs, still Wilt Chamberlain's numbers would be better than Michael Jordan. Of course, that he had a decrease in his scoring average, but his scoring average would be 29.3 points per game during the playoffs. 29.3, which is worse than Michael Jordan's, Allen Iverson's, and Kevin Durant's, right? So take that into consideration. His rebounding average, his second all time, considered all the career, would be the first. And Michael Jordan's numbers would also have an increase, but not enough to match Wilt Chamberlain's. Not enough to say that he was better than Wilt Chamberlain. So we're taking the best Wilt Chamberlain ever produced versus the best Michael Jordan ever produced. Wilt Chamberlain is better than Michael Jordan, all right? Both in the regular season and in the playoffs. And also in the finals, if we considered that Michael Jordan played 3 finals and Wilt Chamberlain played 2, 64 and 67, Michael played 1991 to 1993. Michael Jordan's scoring average in the playoffs is great, of course, but we have to remember that he had most of these amazing scoring runs in first rounds. To show you an example of that, Michael Jordan has scored 50+ points during the playoffs 8 times in his career. Wilt Chamberlain, who ranks second in this category, Michael's first, scored 50+ points in 4 games during his career. But Michael Jordan scored 50+ points in the playoffs first rounds 6 times. So it means that other 2 times came either in the conference semifinals or conference finals or in the finals. Wilt Chamberlain, on the other hand, scored all of these 50 points either in division or conference semifinals and twice in the conference finals. So it means that both of them have had the same capacity of producing scoring in the playoffs. Michael wasn't better than Wilt Chamberlain. And if you analyze and you take into account that rebounding and defense wins every time, like Kobe Bryant said, you will understand that Wilt Chamberlain's impact in the game, and then not just in these 9 seasons, but for all of his career, even when he was heavier, older, and injured, his impact for his team he could adapt and he could play different roles, and he did that because his team needed, and he did that, and he managed to be the finals MVP at 35 years old. He is the third oldest all-time finals MVP, and Michael Jordan is the fourth oldest all-time MVP in the finals, right? Michael in 1998, Wilt in 1972. LeBron has surpassed both of them recently, and Jabbar still holds the record for the 1985 run. We can consider that Jabbar was playing there with Magic Johnson, who averaged 14 assists per game during that final run. So let's say that it would have been better to say that there was a co-finals MVP for Jabbar. He wasn't the main player of his team, while Wilt and LeBron and Jordan had been the main players for their teams. But still, over this document, I beg you guys to read it, and you understand how much impact Wilt has had over his teams during his career, and that it's just a blatant lie that he played worse during the playoffs. The only thing that happened was that he changed his game over his career, and when his main objective was to score, he scored better than Michael Jordan. When he had to assist, he assisted better than Michael Jordan being a guard and he being a center. And as for rebounding, he did that over his career. No one has ever matched him. Only Bill Russell came close to him. There's no Dennis Rodman out there. And if there is a Dennis Rodman out there, where was he playing during the pinnacle of his career? For the Bulls, together with Michael Jordan. Who has been the finals MVP in 1996? Michael Jordan officially, but in fact, it was Dennis Rodman, because defense and rebounding wins every time. And what happened during the 1996 finals was that Dennis Rodman was the main player. He caused the most impact in that game, and he should have been crowned the MVP of that final series. But of course, that Michael Jordan is a better media portrait to crown him as the greatest ever, and so on. Guys, you need to go deep into the stats. You can't just look at them as the iceberg. You're just seeing the iceberg tip. The iceberg tip says that Michael Jordan was the best ever in the playoffs, and Wilt Chamberlain wasn't nearly as good as he has been during the regular season. But in fact, this is not true. Wilt Chamberlain played amazingly during the playoffs, and he played differently. At least he played in 3 different ways over his career, and he has been successful in each of them. The least successful he has been was when he was the main scorer. But then he stopped because he realized that. He said, come on, I'm scoring as much as I can, but still we are not winning. What should I do for us to win? All right, improve your shooting, improve your rebounding, if that's possible, improve your defense, and improve your playmaking. All right, I'll do that. He did that, and they were successful. Michael Jordan, at the peak of his career, has never matched Wilt Chamberlain at the peak of his career. All right, guys? So please read the document and see the links I will put on. Okay, thank you very much.